people feel at work is directly correlated to how good the work is. If people feel blah, the work will be blah. Play is a shortcut to creating an environment where people feel good and therefore the work is good. Elizabeth Cushing is the CEO of Playworks, where she brings play into her culture of hundreds of employees, as well as companies like Salesforce and primarily elementary schools. We at Turning the Corner have had the pleasure of helping her company find some of their great talent, and I'm thrilled to have her as a guest on our podcast today to share her experiences around bringing play into all these corporate environments and why it's so good for our cultures. Elizabeth Cushing, welcome to How I Turned the Corner.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks.
So tell us a little bit more about why you think this is so important and why play can create a feeling of care inside company cultures.
So I didn't know this before I came to Playworks. And so I've had the experience. I've been here 19 years. I didn't start out as CEO. I grew up in the organization. And I've had the experience every day of watching how a culture of play influences how people engage with each other, how they work. And so I've come to understand it, but I didn't start out understanding it. And what really stands out first and foremost is that play is an intrinsic human behavior. We're wired to do this. And in our culture, broadly, we celebrate play for children. We celebrate play in the form of sport as adults. But we don't really celebrate play in the kind of silly, free form, no purpose to it kind of way for adults very much. But Playworks does, and its culture, and it did even before I got here. And what I've noticed really the value of it is in the connections that it creates between people. When we play, we stop being the CEO. We stop being wherever we are in the hierarchy, and we're just a player in a game. And that changes the dynamic of, oh, you're a human, I'm a human. We're both trying to figure out how to win this game or do well in this game. And we find out we share much more than we might have thought before. And that connection between people is really where the power lies.
Because it creates like a sense of vulnerability in a way. Because when you're playing, you might fail. You might not even know the rules. You might have to be taught the rules. And when you kind of get in that state of feeling semi-vulnerable in a really easy way, it kind of opens yourself up a little bit. I mean, that's what I kind of am experiencing as you're talking.
Yeah, it's very accessible. And the stakes are incredibly low. Right. So, whereas in the workplace, we're all trying to demonstrate our expertise, our value to the organization. When we are playing a game, and I'll tell you, we have a 4-square court taped out near where we all sit down and eat. It doesn't matter what happens. And my expertise in 4-square compared to yours might be slightly better because I play it more often, but really it's not that much different. And so we're all amateurs. And when in your life do you get to be, as an adult, joyfully, embracingly an amateur?
Yeah. So, and I imagine there's a lot of brain science around this too, and that when you play, you get a little hit of dopamine, you're experiencing something with somebody else, you've got a little oxytocin running through you. And those feel-good hormones are also really good for getting us into states of flow, getting us into states where we can actually solve problems faster. I mean, I imagine there's more to this than just connecting with people too.
Yes, it definitely gets us going. And I want to give you a great example because it's something we do all the time. So we all have the experience of meetings, many meetings, and the experience of the meeting can be dramatically shifted by how you start. So at Playworks, what we do when we are starting a meeting is we have a check-in question. And we do this whether we're having a meeting in person, we're having a meeting on screen. And the check-in question is not, oh, Kendra, how do you feel today? The check-in question is something usually somewhat lighthearted, something to connect as humans. So, for example, I'm going to ask you, what was your first concert?
My first concert was Pink Floyd In 1993, yeah.
So there is something I would never guess about you. And then when I tell you my first concert was U2, Unforgettable Fire at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, and my eyes light up about that, you now see something in me that's human, that's fun, that is not whether I'm going to be really productive in this meeting or not. Everyone gets to answer the question. They can pass if they want. There's a lot of laughing. There's a lot of, oh, I saw that band too. And now you've created a community for the meeting. Mm-hmm. And the energy is different. And we actually have a whole set of check-in questions. They're all very light. Some of them are really great. Like, what's something you're good at that none of us would know? And my answer is parallel parking. How would you ever know I'm really good at parallel parking? But there's like these, it's just the humanity that then creates a space where we can all fully be present.
Right. I'm a terrible parallel parker, Elizabeth. I actually take pictures of my poor parallel parking and send them to my colleagues. Like, once again, look what I did.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. So what are other examples? Like, what are other questions that people could be asking in these opening up meetings just for our listeners? So,
favorite Halloween costume?
Ooh.
Or what do you love about fall, the season of fall? And as an example of what happens, like, I don't love fall the most. I love summer the most. And so I will say, well, actually, I don't love fall. I understand that I'm a little bit of an outlier. And what that does in the room is, especially when I do it, it says it's okay not to be the same. And we're gonna create a community where we still care for you, even if you don't go with the question. It might be, what sport would you love to do if you had the skill in the Summer Olympics? Might be, what's a food you hate? It's not always positive, but it is speaking to us as whole people. Mm-hmm. And I think that is an example of how play signals to our team members here at Playworks, we want you to bring your whole self. We don't want you to be your professional self only. When you're here, we want to know you. We care about you. And we want you to bring that whole self to the workplace. And I feel like that is a secret of Playworks culture. Many nonprofits like ours attract people who are attracted to mission work. So we share that already. That does not mean that as a nonprofit, it's easy to create culture where people want to be, to retain staff, to be a place that is, a best place to work. I think it's the play that we embrace every day here that is the differentiator for us in our sector.
Well, and I think that being able to bring your whole person, I think one of the big shifts and why I think this people revolution is coming or is here already is that COVID showed us that we can bring our whole person. Mm-hmm. And, and we want to keep doing that. Like that feeling of being able to be 100% yourself just feels good. When you put on a mask and you're hiding behind something, you're not feeling good about that. And so many of the leaders we coach and help and support are so resistant to that idea. They still want this Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 environment, show up whether there's work to do or not. And there's like this sort of feeling around like, I don't want you to bring your whole person. I just want you to do the work. And I don't think companies are going to survive that think that way.
I don't either. Number one, I don't understand it. Right. But number two, if you look at the, every measure of the success of an organization or company, it's financials, it's employee retention, it's, employee net promoter score, it's the way it attracts customers. It's all related to how it feels. And in our business, the people are delivering the service, the product. The way they feel about working here gets translated directly to the people we're trying to support. And so to me, there's absolutely no distance between how they feel in our workplace and how well Playworks does. as an organization. And even I've watched for-profit businesses. I think Salesforce is a good example of a business where culture is very, very strong. You are part of a community. You are a person here. And even though they're a for-profit company, they still see that connection of how employees feel to the company's success. And I think it's only going to get to be more and more true.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I think especially when you start looking at really talented people who are being forced into an environment where they're not bringing their whole self, they're not cared for, they're going to say, I'm out of here. They're going to say, I'm not going to work. And they're going to leave those companies and go to companies like yours.
Right. Well, you're reminding me of something. You all help us with recruiting of our frontline staff who are in their 20s.
Right.
You would imagine that an organization of 400 employees, that most people, especially young people, would stay here 2 to 5 years. We have a couple dozen people who've been here 15 years or more, who started as that 24-year-old, have moved up and now are in positions of leadership. And they're not leaving because it feels good to be part of this community. Mm-hmm. That's kind of unheard of in the nonprofit sector, where we don't pay as well as the for-profit sector. And I'm telling you, it's not just the mission. I mean, we do pulse surveys and employee engagement surveys, and consistently, year over year, the 2 top reasons people stay are the mission and the people. Mm-hmm. So they know their people. They are connected with those people. That's why they stay. And I would hypothesize that would be the same in any for-profit company, especially now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I've had people on this podcast that are doing some of the most bland work you can imagine, like Jim Deary with Field Fasteners, one of the nicest people I have ever met in my life. They're doing nuts and bolts, literally selling nuts and bolts. And they have this phenomenal culture. And I think, like, okay, if they can do that, anybody can do it, because you want to talk about a non-purpose driven business, right? Classic commodities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a good example. And I think it's a good thing that there's pressure on companies to break the old mold of what a successful company looks like, and to insert culture as a measure of a company success, and to imagine that we are members of the community as employers. Mm-hmm. We're not just here to produce. And so if we're members of the community, shouldn't we exemplify what kind of community we want to live in and work in? And I feel like that blurring of the lines of work and community is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. And I was starting to say in the intro together with you that, you know, business as a community is really powerful too. To think of all the employees we touch, the people we work with, the communities we support, the schools you support, you're all in community together. Mm-hmm. And when we start to, and we are all craving community. And I think business being a source of that is a really unique idea too. And a novel idea that I think is really important to explore. And we can't do that if we don't care.
No, we can't. And I believe people care if you give them the opportunity to, and believe that I don't believe I'm judged only on our financial results or even our impact results. I'm also judged on how I create a culture, right? Like that's part of my role. I will say that I think there's been a negative pressure that's just come from working remotely, that it's harder to connect with people. It's harder to protect and maintain your culture when we're all on screens. And one of the things I noticed that has worked well for us is Playworks instituted Slack in the midst of the pandemic. And we use it, I think, quite efficiently for productivity. But I was thinking about trying to promote a new behavior or a new set of learning across the organization. You know, as CEO, change management is a big part of my job. If we want to add something to what we're doing, I need to socialize and bring people along. And I was thinking about Slack and how might it help us. And I said to myself, let's go look at which Slack channels have the most traffic across the board, like where it's naturally like a place where people go. The number one Slack channel is appreciations.
Oh, I love
The
that.
appreciations channel is literally a place where any employee can go on and say, I appreciate so and so or 8 so and so's for stepping up in this way. Here's an image, here's a video, and then the emoji, avalanche comes. And I thought, okay, that is telling me something about what our employees value. Mm-hmm. They value the opportunity to appreciate each other. So any kind of change I want to make, I need to take that into account. So there are ways even that all this remote work has inspired new creative ways of protecting our culture, lifting up our culture, that I better take note of. I better pay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We've been experimenting a lot. Well, I've always treated turning the corner as kind of a petri dish where I figure we try out everything, right? And if it's like, if we can make it work, then we're going to help companies make it work. And so we've played with remote work. We've played with all the different flexible models for work since I started this business in 2011. So when I first opened up Turning the Corner, it was 100% come as you are, come when you want, just get the work done. Wow. But when COVID hit, we were like, no problem. We've already been doing this, right? And so, but the big adjustment since COVID has been, okay, now how do we really create this? Like, what's our hybrid model now? Mm-hmm. And what we've figured out is that once a month, we just get together as a team, and that's enough. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you how nice it is to travel transfer the rent part of my P&L to like meals. Right?
Yes, exactly. Well, and I'm a person who loves working with people in person. I love it. I'm in the same office space we were in before. I want everyone to be here. And that's not what works best for everyone who works at Playworks. So similarly, we have a once a month lunch that the people don't have to come, but they're strongly encouraged, and they know everyone else is going to be here, and we all connect. Yeah, and then we also instituted, hey, in case you're wondering, a whole group of us are going to be here Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's completely optional, but I've found that the folks who crave the in-person like I do are coming. The people who aren't. It's fine. It's not getting in the way of work not getting done. And that flexibility, if you told me 5 years ago that we were going to do our work this way, especially work that's about kids and play, I would have been skeptical, but we've adapted, and I get fed by the Tuesday and Thursday group and the once a month lunch. And I think we're signaling again to employees that we want them to bring their whole selves. And if their whole selves are better suited to work at home, okay.
Right. Why do we feel a need to dictate that? Or why is that something that a lot of leaders feel a need to dictate? You need to be here because I want you here, even though so many people will say, well, I'm more productive at home. I've got 2 extra hours a day to be productive because I'm not getting ready and driving there or whatever. It's just so interesting to me how there's like I think it actually comes back to HR kind of screwing this up in the early days of like a policy-based, culture agenda is what so many people have subscribed to. And mm-hmm. a policy-based agenda is just not going to work when you're trying to adapt quickly.
True. I think there's the traditional model of leadership too. When younger people ask me, like, what have you learned about leadership over your career? The thing I say is, I thought, being raised as a white middle-class young woman, that leadership meant knowing what to do and convincing everyone else to do that thing. And I've learned now that leadership is not knowing what to do at all. I mostly don't. It is about creating the conditions for everyone else to figure out with you what to do and how to do it. And so I think the model of leadership that is tell people, decide, flies in the face of figuring out what's best for the team to get something done or how they work. And I think you can see in the literature or in all the profiles on LinkedIn all the time that the emerging, thriving model of leadership is no longer know and tell. It is collaborate and generate. So I'm embracing that.
Mhm. Yeah, I say that all the time. We have to create the conditions for people to thrive. I love that you just said that, because I literally say that sentence 3 or 4 times a day. And because I think that's our goal as a leader, like to more gently sit back and observe the ecosystem and figure out what's needed, what ingredients are needed, what life needs to be introduced, whatever that might be. And then sitting back and saying, okay, well, that didn't work, or that did work. Okay, let's adjust. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out what's next. And I think you're absolutely right. The new model is more of managing an ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't mean we're a democracy. We're not a full democracy. I have responsibilities, and I have to make decisions sometimes that don't go with what the majority of employees want.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that 80% of the time when we can collaborate and decide on decisions, that isn't the way we function. I think it's not all or nothing. I have gotten very clear on where do I need to be the decider for something that's risk related, or the organization is going to veer off its mission. And what are the decisions that are made collectively, even without my input altogether? I think there's a way to lead where that's a both and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do you do that? I mean, what do you think is the key, or one of the keys to your success in like having this, fully remote, very remote team, right? You have locations all over the country.
Yeah.
So there's nobody there to tell these folks what to be doing on a daily basis. So how do you keep everyone kind of going in the same direction and keeping them on track toward the mission?
Well, the culture actually helps I think of it as kind of the foundation within which we decide how to do the work. So everyone understands we're about play. We are a playful place. Everyone's included. That helps, because people then want to, or they trust that the directions or the decisions we're making at HQ are in the spirit of that culture. So they're already predisposed to work alongside us as opposed to oppose it, even though they're distant. But the other thing is, we talk a lot about where are we headed? What do the kids need? What do the parents and teachers in our schools need? What does success look like? So I spend a lot of time on alignment, clarity, repeating, inviting members of our team to share what that looks like for them. So we're kind of constantly reminding folks, oh, this is where we're trying to get. So this decision about X is serving that. And so I think some people describe this as always explain the why behind a decision. Mm-hmm. And do that up front, that reminding people what our why is. And when we're making a decision or making a new investment, saying this connects to our why, mm-hmm. about more kids having access to play. So right. That feels very important. And I think the traditional model of leadership discounted the importance of every employee being connected to the why. There was mm-hmm. this idea of sort of patronizing. You don't need to understand that. We're making the big decisions here. I need to be able to explain every decision in the context of why. Mm-hmm. And that's been a very good skill for me to build over time. And that gives me confidence that we're keeping people in the fold as we make decisions that maybe they're not part of the actual decision-making process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people think they should be able to say it once and not have to say it again. And I think what you said a second ago is really important. You have to repeat yourself and connect the dots, connect it back to why what they're doing is so important, why this decision they're about to do or activity is so important. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't necessarily, they don't have the bird's eye view we have of our organizations to see why how it all connects together. So we have to do that. So I think that's a really important point you bring up.
And, yesterday I explained a decision that we made to accept a sort of negative financial result that none of us could control. And we were going to press forward anyway. And I explained to a group of 60 leaders across the country, some of whom have no financial responsibility, what the criteria were that we used for that decision. And I said, this is this decision we made. And next time we may not be in a position to make this positive of a decision, but I wanted you to understand how it's made. And mm-hmm. I don't think that's how traditional leadership was designed, but I believe it is what's necessary to make my organization thrive, given that we're driven by people. People are 85% of our budget. Then we really need to invest in that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that is a perfect spot to end on, Elizabeth. I can't thank you enough for your generosity of your time, as well as the business we've been able to do together and the impact you're having in the world. So with 2 kids myself, I see how critical the work is that you're doing. And so just thank you on behalf of all of us parents as well.
You're very welcome. I'm so happy to be able to contribute play and to be able to share here today. So I'm glad we got to get together.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Sure.